Hello and welcome to this edition of NYSE Governance Services Inside Compliance. I'm Erica Salmon Byrne, and I'm very happy to be able to welcome to the studio with me today Veta Richardson, who is the President and CEO of the Association of Corporate Counsel. Veta, thank you so much for joining us today.
Glad to. Thank you for inviting me.
So part of the reason why we asked you to come on the program today is, of course, we've recently released the 2013 version of the ACC Corpedia joint survey that we've done on benchmarking and risk assessments, and we, of course, have been running the survey with you all since 2005.
Yes.
We have some wonderful trending data, and we ask a series of questions during the course of that conversation that really go to the heart of developments in the compliance function. And we've worked together to add questions to the survey over the years as the compliance function has matured. I know that you all are doing some really interesting new work, speaking of the maturation of the profession. Can you talk to me a little bit about some of the tools that you've made available to your members recently?
Certainly. Well, in fact, in response to our member demand, one little metric is that we've watched as our membership in the compliance and ethics area has expanded. ACC has a committee that addresses this topic, and that committee has grown to more than 5,000 members.
Wow.
Out of a total membership pool of about 33,500. So compliance and ethics squarely is a key responsibility for in-house counsel, and they're coming together to network and share and exchange knowledge and information. So we've watched that network expand. We've also watched our Chief Legal Officer survey when we ask General Counsel annually, what are the things that keep you up at night? Compliance, ethics, keeping up with regulatory challenges are always top of mind. So in response to that, ACC has built educational and training instruction around it, and we've recently launched something called our Compliance Portal that enables our members worldwide to share training materials, programs, information that they've established to help their companies keep abreast of compliance challenges.
Yeah, and it's one of the really interesting things that we've certainly seen in the course of the years that we've been running the survey together is this internationalization of compliance. You know, we're seeing an increasing level of interest in it from companies that are based overseas. We're seeing a number of our multinational companies that we work with are embedding compliance officers in the business units, and it only makes sense. You know, one of the things we see in the survey is an acknowledgement on the part of companies that local tone and having local resources available to their employees really matters from that perspective.
Yes, we've seen that. In fact, just since the first of the year, I've traveled throughout Europe, throughout Asia, been in the Middle East as well, throughout the U.S. and Canada, talking with members about some of their worldwide compliance needs. And I'd say that that is one of the biggest challenges. It's taking a compliance program and translating it so that it can be effective and meet the local regulatory requirements as well as the corporate culture.
Yeah, and you know, one of the interesting things that we saw when we looked at the survey results, and we've seen it on a slow upward trend over the course of the last couple of years across the board, is the trend of compliance no longer reporting up through the General Counsel. And so, you know, the survey results now show that there are 39% of the respondents said that they report directly to the CEO. We have roughly the same percentage saying that they're still reporting directly to the General Counsel. And so increasingly we're seeing the compliance function have a seat at the table along with what has been the traditional legal function.
Well, I think that that's important. Certainly compliance continues to report through the GC, but we're also seeing that the GC is having a seat at the table, you know, along with other C-suite executives to make sure that he or she can provide input regarding compliance issues, and make sure also that as corporations report and keep their board of directors abreast of what's going on, where the risk assessments tell them that there are potential challenges, General Counsel are front and center as part of those discussions. And we actually believe that that's a best practice, that certainly boards of directors have indicated that compliance and ethics are issues that keep them up at night as well. They want to know what's going on within the company, how are companies discharging training, developmental opportunities to make sure that people on the ground understand, you know, the requirements that they need to comply with. So, you know, it remains a top of mind issue.
Absolutely, and that actually brings up, I think, an area that many of the companies that we talk to and many members of the audience are curious about, which is the board of director conversation. And you wrote an article for Law 360 talking about the importance of board of director oversight. So I'd like to unpack that issue a little bit, because one of the really interesting findings to me in the survey was that a vast majority of the companies that responded said that they're only spending about an hour or less training their board on ethics and compliance.
Yes. We see that as an opportunity for the General Counsel Office, the Chief Compliance Officers, to really get involved in open lines of communications with their boards of directors. Also to be able to be impactful in their organizations, to move that needle from an hour or less to a more significant and robust opportunity to have those discussions that are essential to the company and its operations. So we see that as an opportunity for general counsel, for compliance officers to add value, you know, in the discussions at the boardroom level.
Right. You know, certainly one of the things that I found of interest in the survey findings, as well as in the article, you know, there's an acknowledgement that the board is so critically important, right? We all understand that from a sort of a theoretical perspective, but then it's a question of how much time can you really get with a busy board. You know, and certainly we've seen on the governance side of things, people are talking about overboarding, you know, directors just not having enough time to really spend engaged in their oversight responsibilities. So there's a line that has to be walked by the general counsel as far as that's concerned.
But I think if you consider the high stakes of non-compliance, that you know, you have to allocate time based upon priorities. And so I think even if it's as small as allocating a portion of the board meeting each year to, or you know, each time to some sort of briefing, or opening communications, so that perhaps there are written communications that are sent to the board or reports that they can read, that this too will open up opportunities for them to really see the enterprise more in total and understand where the risks and opportunities lie.
Yeah, well, and certainly I think one thing that many of the compliance officers that we talk to on a regular basis are saying is they're going to at least be making the code of conduct training that they have all their employees taking available to the board. Now it's still pretty rare to find that board members are directed that they have to take it. You know, the mandatory aspect of it is not as common, but at least saying, here's the code of conduct training that we're requiring all of our employees to take. Certainly the committee members who are charged with overseeing the program at a minimum need to know what that program looks like, and how better to know than actually sit and take the training yourself.
Right, and I think that what we'll see is that is an emerging trend. I think that as the programs are opened up to more will take an interest, you know, go through the training, understand it, and it will create a dialogue and conversation, you know, among board members.
Yeah. And you know, one of the other things that we're talking to companies about is the idea of then using that board level involvement with the training as an opportunity to communicate with employees. Because it's it's an opportunity for the directors to set the tone from the top, and I know you talk about that in the 360 article, how important it is that board members are really engaged in those communication activities.
Well, I agree entirely, and as I wrote in the article, I think it's important for the average employee to know that the company is creating a true compliance culture, and that starts with the messaging at the top from the C-suite, the chief executive officer, including messaging that could come from some of the lead directors. So these things can be encompassed within training programs and modules, and with the way that we're all connected via the internet, there are opportunities to send video messaging that send, you know, a clear message from the top that compliance is front and center, and also to open up opportunities for employees to be able to ask questions and make sure they really understand what are the expectations of them.
Right, and I think that question piece is an interesting one, because you know, the survey data that we've seen over the years has been that employees are concerned about retaliation. They're concerned about coming forward, what's going to happen to my career. It takes a certain amount of courage to step up and say, you know, I've seen something that isn't going the way I want it to be. And so, looking at the experience of your members, talking to general counsels, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give a brand new compliance officer to say, here's how you create an environment where employees are going to come forward and report misconduct?
Well, I think it starts with an open door policy and making it clear to employees that to the extent they have concerns, that your office is open, for them to be able to raise it, to make sure that there is a clear structure in place so employees understand, well, how do I go about reporting concerns or asking questions in an appropriate way within this organization. I also think it starts with being responsive, to having clear training programs that are set up on a regular basis, so that there's an expectation that everyone who has responsibilities that could be placing the company more at risk understand what the rules are and how they should engage.
Right, absolutely. And that's actually one of the interesting things that I found in the report. For the first time last time around, the 2011 survey, we added some questions about mid-level manager training. And what are you doing for your mid-level managers? Are you training them on what retaliation looks like to the average employee and how to create an open door environment? And we're seeing some really good trends in terms of companies acknowledging that the tone at the top is so critically important, but it really isn't going to work unless it's also the tone at the middle.
That's true. But, another interesting finding in the report was how despite the fact that everyone acknowledges compliance, ethics issues keep me up at night.
Yeah.
That risk and potential for liability is a concern for the corporation enterprise-wide. It was surprising to me within the findings, though, which impact how middle management perceives things, the relatively limited dollars that are invested in training programs, and you saw a very sharp divide between companies that have annual revenues above or below the $500 million mark.
Yeah, it is. It's I think it's one of the interesting interesting challenges that compliance officers have is that unless you've had something go wrong within your organization or within your industry, it's very hard to make the argument that you really are an insurance policy, that you're an insurance policy worth spending money on, because how do you prove the negative? And that is something that I think every compliance officer I've spoken to says, I know what I'm doing is keeping the company from spending more money down the road, but how do I really demonstrate that value?
Yeah, justify those expenses. Well, I think a lot of the high-profile companies that have been in trouble, cause the attention to be raised at the board of directors level, because people see other organizations and industries facing substantial types of liability. So I think, those briefings, keeping abreast of what's going on, having the board, engaged in a discussion around compliance, good, strong communications, and training programs. These things help, to make the argument that it's worth the spend and the investment.
And of course also having comparative industry data, right?
Yes.
So being able to say our budget compared to companies of our size is not where it needs to be, and that's where survey work like the report that we've just come out with is so critically important. And audience members who are interested in taking a look at those findings in far greater detail can find additional information about getting their hands on that survey on our website. So I strongly encourage anyone who found the conversation that Veta and I were having about the findings interesting to take a look at Corpedia.com, and you can download the form to get your hands on the report there. Veta, it was such a pleasure having you in the studio with us today. I really appreciate you coming and appreciate you sharing some of the findings with us, and look forward to all the good work that ACC is doing in this space for its members and future members.
Thank you. It's been our pleasure to work with Corpedia, and we look forward to seeing what next year's findings will
exactly.
tell us. How's the needle moved?
Right, precisely. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this edition of Inside Compliance. We'll see you next time.